They called her Mepe, not Dedopali, not queen, Mepe, king. In the Georgian language, in the Georgian political tradition of the 12th century, queen meant something less than what she actually was. So they gave her the title they gave kings. And then she exceeded it. She ruled for 29 years. She won every military campaign she authorized. She presided over a golden age of Georgian culture, the greatest literature, architecture, and artistic achievement the country had ever produced. She was canonized as a saint by the Georgian Orthodox Church. And then she died. And within a generation, everything she had built was consumed by the greatest military force the medieval world had ever seen. This is the story of the greatest monarch in the history of the Caucasus, the woman whose reign is still called the Golden Age by the country she ruled, and the collapse that came the moment she was no longer there to prevent it. To understand what Tamar achieved, you first need to understand the extraordinary inheritance she was given. Because the Georgia she ruled was not the Georgia that most of the world knows, if it knows Georgia at all. The Bagrationi dynasty, Tamar's royal house, had been building Georgia's power for 3 centuries before she was born. Her great-great-grandfather David IV, called the Builder, had done something that most of the medieval world considered impossible. He had expelled the Seljuk Turks from Georgian territory. The Seljuks, the same force that had crushed the Byzantine Empire at Manzikert in 1071, that had driven the Crusades by threatening Jerusalem, David pushed them out of Georgia. By the 12th century, Georgia was not a frontier kingdom clinging to survival. It was a sophisticated state with a functioning legal system, a literate aristocracy, a church that served as the backbone of national identity, and a military capable of holding its own against the most powerful forces in the region. Tamar's father, George III, made a decision that was, for the medieval world, almost without precedent. He crowned his daughter as co-ruler while he still lived. Not as regent, not as a placeholder for a male heir, as the designated successor. He was going to hand Georgia to his daughter, and he was going to make sure the kingdom accepted it before he died. It was a brilliant political calculation. It almost wasn't enough. When Tamar took the throne in 1184, the Georgian nobility decided to test exactly how much of her father's power she had actually inherited. The noble council moved quickly. They demanded rights they had never held under her father: the authority to approve or reject the queen's decisions, to function as a check on royal power that would effectively make them the real rulers of Georgia, with Tamar as their figurehead. Tamar did not fight this battle directly. She was 24 years old, newly enthroned, and she understood that a direct confrontation with the full force of the Georgian nobility before she had established her own authority was a fight she might not win. So she negotiated. She conceded ground she could afford to lose, and she began building. The nobility insisted on a husband. They selected one, Yuri Bogolyubsky, a Russian prince with a strong military record and connections to the Principality of Vladimir Suzdal. On paper, a reasonable match, a military asset, a political alliance. Tamar married him, and within 2 years, she had him divorced and exiled. The sources describe Yuri as unsuited to the role he had been given. Dissolute, politically irresponsible, a destabilizing presence at a court that Tamar was trying to organize around her own authority. She built the case for divorce through the Georgian Orthodox Church. She got the divorce. She had him exiled. A Russian prince thrown out of Georgia by a queen who had married him because the nobility demanded it, and divorced him because the marriage did not serve Georgia. He came back. twice. He rallied dissident Georgian nobles. He raised armies. He tried to take by force what he had failed to hold by marriage. Tamar's forces defeated him both times. The second defeat was permanent. Yuri Bogolyubsky, prince, soldier, expected king of Georgia, fled and never returned. After his second defeat, Tamar chose her own second husband, a Georgian prince named David Soslan, her choice, her terms, her decision. And with the domestic political threats resolved on her own terms, she turned to the world beyond Georgia's borders. When the domestic threats were resolved, when the nobles who had tried to limit her had been faced down, when the husband she had been forced to take had been defeated and expelled, when the second husband she had chosen herself was fighting beside her, Tamar turned Georgia into something the region had never seen. Her military campaigns redrew the map of the Caucasus and eastern Anatolia. At the Battle of Shamkor in 1195, Georgian forces defeated the armies of the Abbasid Caliph. The Abbasid Caliph, the symbolic leader of Sunni Islam, whose armies had been the most feared military force in the region for centuries. Defeated by Georgia. In 1203, Suleiman Shah, Sultan of the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, sent Tamar a letter. He demanded she convert to Islam or face his army. She refused. He sent his army. Georgia destroyed it. The Sultan who had threatened the conversion or destruction of the Queen of Georgia fled the battlefield. The pattern was becoming familiar. And then the Byzantine Empire fell. Not to Tamar, to the Fourth Crusade. In 1204, Western Crusaders sacked Constantinople, the city that had been the center of Eastern Christendom for 9 centuries. In the fragmentation that followed, Tamar supported her relative Alexios Komnenos in establishing a new Greek Christian state on the Black Sea coast, the Empire of Trebizond, a state that would outlast Georgia's Golden Age by 250 years, built on Georgian military support and Georgian strategic vision. And while her armies were winning, her court was creating. Shota Rustaveli, the greatest poet in Georgian history, wrote his masterpiece, The Knight in the Panther's Skin, at Tamar's court. He dedicated it to her, the specific extraordinary coincidence of a civilization's greatest military power and its greatest cultural achievement happening simultaneously under the same ruler is not a coincidence. It is the specific product of a ruler who understood that military victory and cultural patronage were different expressions of the same civilizational confidence. The military victories were real. The cultural golden age was real. But neither was automatic. Neither happened without the specific, daily, unglamorous work of governance. The decisions about which nobles to trust, which grievances to address, which institutional interests to accommodate, which to override. The Georgian sources describe Tamar's governance with specific, unusual detail. She sought counsel. She listened. She then decided. She was accessible to petitioners. Ordinary people who needed the Queen's attention could get it. She took the administration of justice personally. The sources record her involvement in specific cases where she overruled judgments she considered unjust. The Georgian Orthodox Church was not simply a religious institution. It was the backbone of Georgian identity. The institution that had preserved Georgian culture, language, and literacy through the darkest periods of the kingdom's history. Its hierarchy had real power. Its approval was politically essential. Its opposition could destabilize any reign. Tamar navigated this relationship with the specific sophistication of someone who understood that genuine faith and political intelligence were not in tension. They were complementary tools. The divorce of Yuri Bogolyubsky was not just a personal decision. It was a masterclass in using institutional authority to accomplish what direct confrontation could not. She built the church case. She secured the ecclesiastical judgment. She used the institution's authority to accomplish what her own authority alone might not have been sufficient to do. This is what made Tamar something beyond a warrior queen or a cultural patron. She was a political architect, designing the specific institutional arrangements that made her power durable rather than merely present. The Georgia her nobles wanted to rule through a controllable queen became some under the queen they thought they could control, the greatest Georgia had ever been. After a while, the argument for limiting her power became very difficult to make. Tamar died in 1213. The exact cause is not recorded with the specificity that modern medicine would require. She was approximately 53 years old. She had ruled for 29 years. She had presided over the greatest period in Georgian history. And she was gone. Her son Georgi IV, Georgi Lasha, succeeded her. He was young. He was capable by most accounts. He was not Tamar. And the kingdom he inherited, the Georgia that Tamar had built, was built on the specific combination of military victory, cultural confidence, institutional sophistication, and personal authority that she had embodied. In 1220, 7 years after Tamar's death, the Mongols arrived. Not raiders, not the Seljuks or the Abbasids that Georgia had defeated before. The Mongol armies of Genghis Khan's generals, moving west through the Caucasus with a speed and ferocity that nothing in the region's experience had prepared it to face. Georgi Lasha died fighting them. His sister Rusudan tried to manage the impossible situation. Diplomatic maneuvering, resistance, the specific desperate strategy of a kingdom trying to survive a force it could not defeat. By 1236, 23 years after Tamar's death, Georgia had become a Mongol vassal state. The kingdom that had defeated the Abbasid Caliph and the Sultan of Rum could not stop the Mongols. Could Tamar have stopped them? No. The Mongol military force was something no single ruler could prevent. It was destroying Russia, Persia, China, and the Abbasid Caliphate simultaneously. Not even Tamar could have changed that. But here is the specific question that haunts the history of Georgia's Golden Age. Could she have managed it better? Could her specific combination of military intelligence, diplomatic sophistication, and political authority have negotiated a less devastating outcome than what her successors achieved? The honest answer, the one that respects both the Mongol reality and Tamar's genuine capabilities, is possibly. The Georgian Orthodox Church canonized Tamar as a saint. Think about what that means. A woman who expelled her first husband, who authorized military campaigns that killed many people, who exercised political power with a sophistication that included manipulation, strategic retreat, and the calculated use of institutional authority. Canonized. The Georgian Church's understanding of Tamar's sainthood is not the sanitized, depoliticized sainthood that later hagiography sometimes produces. It is the sainthood of someone who did exactly what her role required: governed justly, defended her people, patronized the faith, and did it with a quality of excellence that the Church recognized as divine gift. The warrior and the saint were not in tension in Georgian memory. They were the same person. In Georgia today, Tamar is not a historical footnote. She is the definition of what Georgia was. Her reign, the Golden Age, is the standard against which every subsequent Georgian ruler has been measured. Her portrait appears in churches alongside theological subjects, without anyone finding this incongruous. She is both queen and saint, warrior and holy woman, political genius and object of veneration. And in Georgian historical consciousness, these identities are not contradictions. They are the same truth. And outside Georgia, she is almost unknown. The woman who defeated the Abbasid Caliph, who expelled the Seljuk Sultan, who created the Empire of Trebizond, who presided over a golden age of literature and architecture that Georgia still measures itself against. Unknown. Not because the evidence doesn't exist, because the education that shaped what the world knows about the medieval world was built by people who were not paying attention to Georgia. There is something the Caucasus teaches that no other landscape quite does. Mountains this old, mountains that have watched empires rise and fall for 10,000 years, do not mourn. They simply remain. The cave monasteries that Tamar's golden age carved into the rock faces of the Caucasus are still there. Vardzia, Uplist Siki, David Gareja, cities carved from mountains, libraries carved from mountains, churches carved from mountains. The Mongols came, the Timurids came, the Ottomans came, the Safavid Persians came, the Russians came, the Soviets came. The monasteries remained. Stone outlasts everything. The warning that Tamar's story carries, the specific lesson that the Golden Age and its abrupt, catastrophic ending teaches, is not about the Mongols. The Mongols were going to come whether Tamar lived or died. No single ruler could have stopped them. The warning is about what happens after the exceptional ruler is gone. Tamar's Georgia was extraordinary, and it was fragile in a specific way that only becomes visible in retrospect. The kingdom she built was organized around her authority, her personal military credibility, her personal political intelligence, her specific relationships with the church, the nobility, and the military. When she died, the kingdom still existed. The institutions still existed. The army still existed. But the specific organizing force, the intelligence and authority that had made all of those elements function together at their maximum capability, was gone. Georgia survived. Not the Georgia of Tamar's golden age. That ended with the Mongols. But Georgia, the language, the faith, the music, the polyphonic choirs, the wine culture, the memory of what it once was, a country the size of a large American state, surrounded by empires throughout its history, that has survived precisely because it refuses to forget who it is. Tamar is remembered as a saint, not because she was perfect, but because she was excellent in a way that her country recognized as something beyond politics. She did what the role required, and she did it better than anyone before or after her. Empires rarely die in one day. They rise in one exceptional person, one ruler who understands what the moment requires and has the capability to deliver it. And then they discover that what was built on one person's genius cannot always survive that person's ordinary human mortality. Tamar of Georgia was extraordinary. She was also mortal. And the mountain does not mourn. It simply remains.